Where do I start? Where do I begin? How do I stop?
Hello, Limiteds. It's David Taylor here again with another conversation on Limited. And today we're speaking with Nic Askew. Hi, Nic.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. And you might notice Nic is based in the US. He's got a British accent, however. And just to introduce Nic, Nic is someone I connected with recently. And I want to speak about who Nic is to me. Some of you know Natasha, and Natasha had seen Nic's work, and she'd been pestering me for some time to say, hey, David, you've got to have a look at these Soul Biographies, have a look at these videos. And immediately I saw that, I was drawn in. And I think for me, what drew me in very quickly was a combination of two things that excite me, that I'm passionate about. That I'm passionate about this idea of transformation by speaking our truth. As you know, in Coaching Unlimited, we play what I don't want you to know about me. We play that game all the time about going deep with our vulnerability. And that's one thing I saw in this. And the other thing is I'm very stimulated by great imagery, by the creative art, the visual art. So Nic, to me, brings these two things together. Now, that's my experience with Nic. And where I'd like to dive in with you, Nic, to begin with, is we spoke the other day, and I'd really like to understand how you describe yourself. Are you a coach? Are you a filmmaker? Who do you see yourself in this world?
Well, describing myself has been a complete and utter nightmare. Let's call it. You know what? I've got the exact same challenge, I think, as any coach worth their salt. In the fact that the work that you guys do, I know that. In fact, I once gave a talk to the ICF on this very thing, and I think the first thing that I said as I was pushed out onto stage was, "Wow, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes," except I probably am, because you spend your lives trying to almost justify what it is that you do in the world, because the world. And I mean the world, people generally don't take a step towards something unless they see what they can get out of it. You know, what's it going to do for me? And the very nature of coaching is to hold a space in which someone can be witnessed and something emerges. And that's just weird, you know, in an empirical sort of way. It's weird because it's not controllable. You're not advising someone. You're holding a space in which something can be recognized, drawn out. You're not really in control of it. And that is a hard thing to describe. You know, what I've just said doesn't really describe it. I think everyone who's a coach will know those times at which, I don't know, magic happened or something happened serendipitously or something incredible happened and was recognized and neither party could really describe it, but it was there. And it changed everything. It was really the point at which transformation happened. And so, you know, I bump up against the same thing. I make films, which is a useful get out, because I can call myself a filmmaker, but to be honest, that's what it's one of the things that's the output. I think what runs through everything is that space. It's like witnessing someone, that's it. Seeing someone, contained in many of the
What I am really curious about, and I share my personal experience. You know, people in Unlimited, they know me well. They've seen me speak, and I work in the space of what I don't want you to know about me. I work in that space of going deep with what I think is my vulnerable truth in the moment and speaking it. And the great test, you know, Brené Brown talks about the vulnerability hangover. You know when you've been truly vulnerable, you wake up the next day and go, oh my God, did I really say that? So that space I'm familiar with. And yet, I know that when I sit in front of a camera, or I even sit being recorded on this call, it shifts my energy in a way that I can't describe. that something gets in the way of that. There's something else happening in that vulnerability. So I'm really curious that the vehicle that I think you use to explore this space is the camera, and I'm really curious. What's your experience of that? What is it in your experience that causes people to behave differently in front of the camera? And how do you get beyond that? How does the camera help you get beyond that?
Well, okay, well, let's unwrap that. I mean, it does do that in this way of filming, which, to be honest, I've made up. In this way of filming, it does in the entirely opposite. You'd think that it makes people self-conscious. What it actually does is it probably says something along the lines of, look, this is important, you're important, what we're about to explore is important, and I'm going to pay utter attention to you. And something kind of magical happens, and you catch presence, if you like. There's only one question ever when filming someone that's important, and that is, are you there or are you not? Much like there must be in coaching as well. You know, if you speak to someone, you know when suddenly everything changes, and the everything changes is the point. It's almost the only point worth getting to, because all the other stuff is just distraction, cleverness, and advice, and all that kind of stuff. And then that everything parts, and there they are, and you've seen them. And so when I kind of unpack that and I think about it, it's like, well, how on earth do you describe that? I think like a couple of decades in business was quite useful for me, although vaguely torturous, to be honest. I spent a couple of decades in business, and it was kind of the marketing business, and I ended up managing director of some big company, and I have no idea why. And it was kind of painful in a way, although I didn't recognize the pain for a long time. But in retrospect, when I look back, I go, oh, the way in which we speak to the world, generally in marketing, let's call it marketing as opposed to advertising or sales, but it's all the same thing. And maybe you could draw the parallel with anyone who's listening to this, in other words, coaches and me as well. We have to put ourselves out in the world in order to drive our business forward and stuff like this. So we speak in this tone. We tell the world what we think it needs to hear in order to get it to do what we want it to do. I'm going to tell you that I'm a great coach, and I can get you from here to there. I can make you more successful. I can make you richer or sexier or whatever you think people are listening for. And that's generally what the marketing business, or the business of marketing, does. It looks to tell the world what they think it needs to hear, to match features and benefits and all that kind of stuff. But that's and that made me very uncomfortable, although I didn't know quite what it was. That's a pretty awful way to be in the world all the time. It's kind of dark and duplicitous. But I'll tell you what, soon after I realized that's the way most of us talk to each other most of the time. We're looking to get something from the situation, even if it's just unconsciously. David, I want you to just like me or accept me or love me, or just, I want to be part of it all. So I'm going to tell you what I think you need to hear. And in the advertising, in the marketing speak, it's almost like if someone spoke to you like that, like you speak to a group of people, or you speak in your advertising or something like that, if you spoke to people like that, people would probably slap you around the face if you took that tone. It's like there's a comedy in there somewhere. As a filmmaker, there's definitely a comedy. But there's another way when one enters a conversation and you don't quite know why you've entered the conversation, and you're being drawn to just follow it. You're not trying to control it. Something very different happens. I imagine it's the coaching experience, where there's a total self-consciousness. In other words, you're kind of not conscious of the moment in one respect. You're not thinking in the back of your mind, come on, I need to get to this advice to get me over this problem. You're just kind of lost. And when one is lost, there you are. You're paying attention to everything. And it's almost like you're following the wind, which is quite amazing. And in film, in certainly in the way that I film and what I'm looking for, because my job is to truly see someone. When that happens, you've got the person. There they are. So as I said, the only question is, are you there or are you not? Is someone telling me what they think it needs to the world needs to hear, or are they just speaking? And so, for example, if we were to make a film of you telling the world about your ability to coach people, there would be times at which you would truly be, giving benefits or telling stories with the objective of convincing someone. Maybe not overtly, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, this is a good story because people recognize this. And you may have told that story many times as well, and the words would lose their charge. But then there'll come a point where that's just forgotten, and there you are. And you've never said these words. These words that are coming out are totally original, and the way you are is different. That's amazing. That is the place in which you can describe, you can articulate what it is that you really offer someone in the world. Because what you're actually doing is you're being it. You are the state in which you want people to get to. And that's the best place to articulate the job of a coach, certainly. That's the best place to articulate the experience of any human being is where someone's totally lost and they don't really know why they're talking. They're just talking. They're not trying to convince the world of anything. They're just exploring, wide open and curious and not knowing. That's an amazing space, and I think that's one people slip into all the time, but they don't notice it, and then they come back to this other place where they don't really believe that they belong to the world, and they've got to convince everyone that they do, or they're worthy of it. And that is catchable on camera. Absolutely is it catchable on camera, and it's the only thing worth making films out of. In fact, I realized really early on in filming, and I used to film quite a lot of famous people, and then I couldn't make films out of half of them. Well, not even half of them, most of them, because what I realized quite profoundly, I think, was the words people say are pretty much insignificant when set next to how they are when they say those words. So people would tell stories, and they would be at the center of their stories, and they were entertaining and distracting, if you like. They would be seen by 1 million people on a Monday morning on YouTube because they were full of drama and the stuff that we tend to gravitate towards. But to be honest, it was pretty useless. The stories were all supporting this great persona, this idea of someone, or they've been told 1,000 times, and they really weren't. They had no charge to them. And then someone that would fall away, and you could have someone essentially reading out of a telephone directory, and it could be totally intoxicating. And I was always fascinated by that. Someone would start talking about something they'd never really reached for before. They'd never even formed words around. And for some reason, I was really drawn to that stuff. And I realized pretty soon on, it's like, wow, that's what I might call the human soul. It's almost like a total vulnerability in the fact that they didn't know where they were going, and it didn't seem to matter. And their humanity and even their sense of their contribution to the world was best expressed when they were like that. It's almost like anything they say was, to me, intoxicating. And to anyone who would pay attention, it'd be like, wow, that's, in fact, there were no thoughts. I wasn't trying to compare anything. I was just there. And, when I feel that on film, and I get the privilege of paying attention to that in the edit. So I sit with that footage for ages and go, oh my God, that's amazing. That piece is amazing. I'm in love with this encounter. versus the other pieces which are, it's kind of interesting. Sure, you described that you do this, and here's a story of someone getting benefit, but the other piece was so much better, and I would want to spend more time with you like that. Now that's worth noting, and actually, when I started to get asked, well, what are you doing? In fact, you asked it way back when I started.
Almost certainly, yes.
Yeah. you asked it. You said, "Well, what are you doing?" To get someone to be unconscious. And I remember on a retreat, I think this one was last year or maybe it was the year before, someone saying, "Nic, what are you doing? I've been watching you, and we've been together for like 3 or 4 days, and I've been watching you, and I can't work it out. What are you doing?" And I had said, and I didn't answer the question for a while, and then just said, "Look, you just asked the wrong question. You didn't ask what I wasn't doing, and that's much more to the point." And I think there's so much that you can put in a space. Like imagine you and me sitting together, and we're talking, and we think we can see each other. But in the space between us, although it looks like it's clear space and I can see you, there's so much intangible stuff. There might be my need to make a good film, to truly see you and give you something you'd find really useful. There might be your need to come over as the person you think that you ought to be. There'll be opinions on both sides and judgments almost. Well, yeah, you're a this and you're a that, and you look at me and you think, well, he's a filmmaker and other people seem to have got some value out of it, so I hope he does a good job. There's all this stuff going on, and it's almost like, if you see that as physically solid, which it kind of is, I can't see you. I'm trying to peek over the top of it, and I can't see you. But when that's absent, there you are. When all those needs and opinions and stuff disappear. So it's much more the stuff that's not there. And when that's not there, and you are essentially just witnessing someone without the need to direct it anywhere, then it's terribly simple to see someone. And it's terribly simple to catch something truly magical of someone and in that space express what it is they contribute to the world, or, just pure, curious exploration. And to me, that's fascinating. And I think
as I say, Nic, as I listen to you, and I know I'm kind of jumping in here, and I know that I could listen to you all day. You have an intoxicating energy, and I wanted to draw out what that was to me. What the word that keeps coming up from you again and again and again, both in the word itself, but also energetically, is truth. And I think why I feel drawn into what you're describing is that we crave truth, and yet it gets stuck behind the need to impress, the need to be impressive, the various masks, the mask of expectation. And one thing I really want to bring out for the listeners, for the Unlimited, is one thing that we believe as a principle is how do we create coaching clients? How do we create coaching relationships? And we don't go down this path of marketing, because that path of marketing, as you described, it is a mask. It's a truth. It's creating something different. It's outside of us that hopefully looks attractive, so people get drawn into it. And so, how do we create the moment of connection, of deeper connection, where we can really be the coach creating a powerful space, and the person sitting in front of us I call it feeling safe. They can open up, they can say anything, they can do anything, and that need to avoid judgment all falls away. Now, the reason why I say all of that is that we had a conversation a week ago. We hadn't spoken before, and I want to give people this context. We hadn't spoken before, and I was curious about your work. And I listened to you speak for 35, 40 minutes, and at the end of that, you didn't invite me, you didn't sell me anything, you didn't even talk about what you had to sell. I said, I'm in. I want to do this. And that to me is a beautiful place of enrollment in the work that we do as Unlimited. And I just wanted to bring attention to that, because that's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you in again. It's not really a question, it was just a reflection on what you're describing. The one other thing I just wanted to say as well, you talked about marketing, that maybe there's a film that could be made about that. I think there was Crazy People, where they told the ridiculous truth about products. And it was wonderful, because I know it was kind of it was a comedy, but people told truth about products, and they weren't trying to pretend it was something else. I wouldn't even say the one that the strapman had for Jaguar. It was hilarious. But it's about how we get to that deeper truth, I think, is something that not everybody, I can't speak for everybody, but I know I certainly crave it, and I know that many people who I work with crave that truth.
Okay, but
yeah,
I think about that often. I can remember. I just had this memory suddenly of like sitting in a lawyer's office in London. Like I remembered I'd left my job as a managing director, and then I went away traveling, and I came back, and I fell for the same old trap, and I went to a thing called a headhunter, which I swore I'd never go to again, and I got this job of a CEO. I mean, it's absurd when I think about it, because I knew nothing of this really large. It was Hayes. It was a huge company. I think it was the 6th biggest company in the country, and my job was to buy companies. I mean, it was just absurd, because I'd never done anything like that before, and really, and I resigned on the 3rd day. And so I wondered, which was kind of uncomfortable, kind of freeing as well, and I didn't know what to do, and I advised people. So I just thought, well, look, what I'll do is I'll sit on my backside and think about the world for a while, and play my guitar and travel and stuff, and I'll do some consulting. And one of the things I consulted in was advising companies on how to represent themselves better. They call it sales, but it was almost the antithesis of sales. It was kind of what you were describing. And I remember my first gig was in a big legal firm, and I was just sitting there with the head lawyer, if that's what they're called, and we're trying to get to the bottom about why they weren't selling much. And all I could think is he was giving me an answer, and then there was another question behind that answer, because he didn't really answer the question, and it kept on going. And I can just remember going, why are you even doing this? And I asked that question, and the whole thing fell apart. Like, he trembled. And he knew that he shouldn't be doing that. He never set out to do this. He was living his dad was living vicariously through him. All that kind of stuff. It was like, and there was a truth behind that. Like, you keep asking questions, and so I kind of wondered about that. And the truest thing that I know, and which comes back to this conversation we had the other day. The truest thing that I know is that we are all inextricably connected, and there's nothing you need do. Nothing you need be other than exactly how you are. I know it's a kind of paradox, because we always want to reach higher and get elsewhere and stuff, but I don't think that's a very useful place. And so when, for example, I start to examine, well, okay, if I'm going to sit with someone or speak with someone on a phone or something, and I think my job is to help them be better, I've immediately said that they're not good enough. I don't believe that to be true. And I mean, I think I filmed, a multiple murderer in prison to modern-day walking saints, or people who would be described as saints. I see the same look in the eye. It's like, it's the same. It's like, no, that there you are. Sure, there might have been some things that you've done that aren't cool, but here you are, and it's I hate to use the word perfect, but here we are. It's like, and from that place, everything kind of is different. Like, there's no one else you need be right here and now, and there's nowhere else you could be. Here we are. And I think that's a place that's That's it. There you are. It's just about that. Because as soon as you're there, everything is quite magnificent. Like the very same things you can look at, but it's like we were on this conversation the other day. We were just lost in the conversation. And I know that, with the stuff that I do, if someone wants to be in front of the camera, there is no place to hide. And that is a seemingly really difficult place to be. But when you're there, you suddenly realize how seemingly easy, simple it is. It's like, oh, it was that all along. I was there all along. And that's the only thing that really counts. All the other stuff can come from that. That's the deepest thing I know. There you are. There's no one else you need be. There's no one else you could be. There you are. It's all right. It's all okay. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to not accept the situation and strive to be better. But that doesn't mean that all that stuff can't happen as well. So like as soon as you're there, suddenly stuff progresses on. But it's almost like you're not in control of it. So there's a huge surrender and free fall in this. And I get that is a really quite frightening thought, like that you're not in control of this. But that's what I see. That's what I believe. I might not be right, but that's why I love sitting with people and hanging out with people in retreats or in front of cameras. And to be honest, it's not really about film. You asked me how I describe myself, and I said I kind of cheat-ish because I make films, so I can call myself a filmmaker, and then I tend to call myself a filmmaker and a poet. That kind of shuts people up and they don't have to inquire, and then we can just get on. Then we can just get on with the business of hanging out together and like investigating this and doing that and being stupid and being serious and whatever seems right, rather than having to justify. It's a cop-out. It's easy. But really what's going on, it doesn't matter whether there's a camera or not. I wouldn't be any different.
You describe, without, it's interesting because in many ways labels are reductive, but I'm curious because you call your process the Soul Biographies Method, which I find it's a really curious name to me. So I even listening to you, I get that sense of soul. And Soul Biographies, what brought you to that name? What brought you to call it that?
Well, I told you I would say I pull my hair out trying to describe what I do, but I haven't got any left anyway. Well, I kind of shave my head, so Soul Biographies seems to be the only two words that made any sense. To be honest, sometimes I think, God, from a aesthetic point of view, it's a bit clunky, it's a bit long. I'd rather call it nothing, but I've got to call it something. I've had thousands of people trying to describe what I do. There was a PR guy out of LA once, out of Hollywood, who was Madonna's PR agent, and God, he works with Eckhart Tolle and Jim Carrey and all the people like that, and he had a go at it, and he just said, I don't know what to do. I think you might be before your time. This is what he said. In fact, I spoke to him yesterday, and he said, I don't think you are before your time now. But this was a while back. And they tried everything in describing it. And to be honest, I was kind of frustrated in those days in trying to describe it. And actually, if you're listening to this as a coach, it's exactly the same thing. And I think this is probably, in fact, the more I think about this is probably it. Just don't bother. Just go out and hang out in the world, and it all seems to work.
If we take away the name, and I know that people who appreciate me jumping in, and because we only have a certain amount of time, so I wanted to allow you to give you a chance to speak to this. That I'm sure there are people listening to this who are curious about when you talk about a retreat, and they might be drawn into wanting to find out more about what that is, and I'm equally curious because I'm coming along in June. So it would be great if you could spend a couple of minutes describing how people might be able to work with you in one of those retreats and what that would mean for them.
All right, okay. The advert. Okay, I should play some music. You said that the name was the Soul Biographies Method was like an odd name, and I was getting asked by so many people to make films at one time. That's what makes me sound really important and sought after, but it's not quite like that. But what I can do is I managed to, for some reason, commit the inexpressible to film, where you can't articulate stuff, which is really why coaches were the early adopters of all the work I do. 10, 11 years ago, they were the first people really that started to go, I get it. It's the same language. We speak the same language. See the world in similar fashion. And so I had all these people, and I couldn't film. It takes me a long time to make films, and therefore it becomes expensive. But there was still a demand for people to say, we can't quite explain to people what we do in the world, how this is. And I was always saying, well, you don't need to. You need to show people how you are, because that's your work. And so I gathered as an experiment, I thought, well, I'll just get a few people in a room together, 4 or 5 people in a room, and we'll film for a couple of days, and then I'll give them all the footage and tell them how to do it. And then I'll be able to, if you like, do more people, serve more people. But what happened was that I asked people what was happening, and I realized pretty soon on that, the process of that, the process of witnessing, the processing of stripping everything out, as opposed to learning more things to put in, was the most sublime process, and really utterly simple. Not easy, but simple. And so it grew into this kind of program, which I called, for want of a better term, the Soul Biographies Method, because the method uses film, uses a video camera, but it's not really a filmmaking course. It is a course about paying utter attention to another human being and getting to that place where there's no one else either of you need to be. There you are. That's the place you can see something. See someone, truly see someone, and truly be seen. And that seems like a really useful place for coaches to experience, or to notice that they have experienced many times before. Just didn't know that that's what it was that was doing the heavy lifting, if you like, in their coaching work. And so the 4 days that we do with this, plus some extra work at the back end, is about getting utterly lost in this space where we have a camera or more, and we are looking to catch the sense of our work in the world. So there's a film component that's useful after, and we're learning how to use a camera and witness someone and catch that, and it be useful to one's practice and a whole lot of other stuff as well. Often, to be honest, I think it's you come for a reason, but actually life has it has something else on the agenda, and often you know that because there's a point in time where time stops and everyone knows it, and one is seen, and I don't know, you can't explain it. So there's that, but that's a really useful space. So that's kind of what we have. We have 4 days. They tend to be 4 days, totally and utterly lost. And I need people. Like, there is no place to hide. I remember, part of my job is to do whatever I can to put people off, almost. It's like, because if you're not up for that, if you're going to struggle and spend your time trying to justify your place in the world, which is fine, that's how we generally are. But if that's not what you want to do, if you don't want to go to a place where there's literally no place to hide, because there you are with me being, I don't know, sometimes I can be incredibly compassionate and sometimes quite rude. Just have to wait for the prompts almost, but it's on camera as well. So my job is to make sure that someone is up for that. But to be honest, if you're a coach and you're not up for that, then you shouldn't be coaching. It's almost like, and I know this to be true, it's much easier to see someone than be seen. And I think, like to sit there and someone else is in the other seat, and the job is for them to become vulnerable. For it to be the other way round is probably the answer to your question, by the way. The question you asked about, well, how do you get someone to that place when there's a camera there? And the answer is probably hidden somewhere in the fact that one has to be totally and utterly vulnerable oneself in the other seat, because it doesn't matter which way the camera is pointing. For example, you're both lost, and you both are not in control of this situation, and you're both wide open. Your eyes are wide open, and you don't know. And you're both exploring together, and you're looking at each other, and you realize you're looking in a reflection. And that is an amazing place to be. And so I think probably it's about that. So there are a bunch of people coming together, and everyone's going to end up, getting a glimpse of that at the very least. And of course, the empirical stuff, the useful stuff that you could explain to someone when you got home is like, oh yeah, we used cameras. And some people will go on to use cameras amazingly well in their coaching practices, for example, and some might just go, it was really about the transformational experience. And the footage that I got, finally telling the world what I really feel about what I do, which is where the experience of it is hidden, rather than telling people that they're going to, get on Skype once a week for the next 10 weeks and it's going to cost this much and they're going to be much more successful as a result.
Beautiful.
There you go. Rambling on. In fact, rambling is a cool word.
Well, I'm so, I don't know, I feel like I've been interrupting, and yet, because I could listen to you for hours, Nic, and I love the wisdom that you bring, and I feel so much into what you share, which is why I'm attracted to this work, and I know that many of the Unlimiteds will also feel that, because I think that's what brings us together, is this search for the deeper truth. I call it losing my way to greatness. I absolutely believe that all the greatest transitions and transformations that I've made in my life haven't come from anything new. They've come from letting go of things I've picked up and just stripping more and more bare. So I really appreciate you spending the time with us today. For those who don't know, who are listening in, Nic works in the UK and he works in the US and has regular retreats throughout the year. And if people want to contact you, Nic, if they want to get in touch with you, do they have a way they can get in touch with you easily?
Yeah, I mean, the best thing to do is just go to my site. I have a whole stack of films up there. And when I say films there, they're human portraits in film. They're the coaching moment caught in black and white portraiture. So you've got these amazing faces. There's different subjects, but essentially people are stripped bare, stripped naked. And the web address is nicaskew.com, which is NICASKEW.com. And you can search Soul Biographies and it'll come up as well. It points towards there. And there's a huge library of stuff that you can kind of show your clients anyway. It tends to get people in the mood for coaching. So the best way is to have a look there. There's also a bit on this Soul Biographies Method and loads of words that people have said about it and some film from some of the retreats and stuff. But the main thing is you get it or you resonate with it, you feel drawn to it or you don't, and the best way to sort that out is to go and have a look. Well, you've had a listen, I guess, if you got to this stage in this call. Yeah. But to go and have a look at the films and then you go, wow, there's something in there. In fact, I was explaining to you in my attempting to put you off that the reason people can't, like the decision is, and it probably draws a parallel to the coaching experience in the main. The decision is one, empirical. In other words, you can justify, you can see a need for doing this. You can see how catching yourself on video, on film, would be a useful thing to just stick on a website, or using a camera in your coaching. Live coaching would be a good thing, or something like that. So you've got this empirical, I can see a need, I can justify it on the budget sheet, but mainly there's this unerring being drawn to it. Like, I don't know why, but I've got to do that. And you kind of got to be insistent that everyone feels that way in some fashion, because you're building a fellowship of people who are going to expose themselves in the nicest possible way to each other. All of us are. And that's an amazing thing. And if someone wasn't up for that, then there's much better ways to spend your money.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nic. And there is so much in this call about your work, about truth. And also, to me, there are so many parallels with the work that we do in creating clients and enrolling clients, because it's the same energy. I'm certainly not of the camp of coaches that have to impress people with six figures and look great and be an expert, because to me that's a fallacy, and I think that's what attracts people to this group. And I love that you've spoken into all of that, and there are so many lessons. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us today, and perhaps we can have another call once I've experienced the 4 days and I've come back, and perhaps we can share from that stage and see what's changed in the conversation.
Well,
thank you again, Nic. And
I tell you what would be, just as a last thing, you're going to be there and you're going to be exposed and you're going to be on film, so you could just share the film.
Of course, I'll do that. Well, I'll do that anyway. I love sharing with this group, and they know my vulnerabilities deeply. So I really look forward to doing that and speaking that truth with them. Thank you so much, Nic, and look forward to connecting with you very soon.
Well, thank you, David.